There is a moment almost everyone knows. You see the situation clearly. You already understand what is happening. You even know what the wiser response would be. And yet, something still pulls you. You speak when silence would have been kinder. You react when patience would have protected you. You act in a way that later makes you wonder, why did I do that? This is not because you lack intelligence. It is not because you lack spiritual understanding. And it is not because you are morally weak. In fact, this loss of control often happens even when awareness is present. You may notice the emotion arising. You may recognize the thought as unhelpful. You may even tell yourself, this is not necessary. And still, the body moves. The words come out. The action happens. This is an important point, because it tells us something essential. Knowing is not always the same as being free. So this experience should not lead to self-blame. It should lead to curiosity. Not, what is wrong with me? But rather, if knowing is not enough, what exactly takes control of us in that moment? When we hear the word demon, the mind often imagines something outside of us, a force that comes, attacks, and takes control. But in the Buddha's teaching, and often emphasized by the Dalai Lama, this understanding is gently corrected. The inner demon is not a being. It is not a dark entity watching us. It is not an external force entering the mind. It is a movement of energy, memory, and habit that has been repeated so many times. It now feels personal. This is why it feels intimate. This is why it speaks in your voice. This is why it does not feel foreign. The inner demon is not something that comes from outside. It is something that unfolds from within, according to conditions. And because it is a process, it can arise and it can pass. At the root of this process is something very subtle. A karmic tendency rises. Perhaps anger, fear, craving, or doubt. At first, it is only an energy, a sensation, a movement in the mind. But then something crucial happens. The mind says, this is me. This anger is my anger. This fear is who I am right now. This moment is the turning point. Nothing has gone wrong yet, but identity has quietly formed. Once the feeling becomes me, it is no longer just an emotion. It becomes a position, a stance. And from that stance, reaction feels justified, automatic, even necessary. So the power of the inner demon does not come from the emotion itself, but from the moment karma turns into identity. This process has three components. First, habit. What has been repeated for years moves faster than conscious thought. Second, self-grasping. The tendency to claim experience as I and mine. Third, automatic reaction. Once identity forms, action follows almost instantly. This is why willpower often fails. Willpower arrives too late after the chain is already in motion. The problem is not that the emotion appears. Emotions naturally arise and pass. The real problem is identification. When anger is seen as anger, there is space. When anger becomes me, there is momentum. This is why the Buddha never taught that emotions must disappear. He taught that they must be seen clearly, without being mistaken for the self. So the key question now becomes, If the inner demon is a process rather than a thing, how can we recognize the exact moment when this process begins? When the inner demon begins to take over, awareness does not disappear. This point is very important. You are not unconscious, you are not asleep, you are not completely unaware. In fact, many people say, "I knew what I was doing. I could see it happening. I even told myself to stop." So what changed? Awareness was still present, but it was no longer leading. It was pushed into the background, while something older and faster moved to the front. This creates a strange inner experience. One part of you is watching, another part is acting. That is why, later on, you don't feel confused about what happened. You feel confused about why you couldn't stop it. This inner split is not a failure. It is a sign that a habitual pattern has temporarily taken the driver's seat. The next sign appears in the tone of thought. Normally, thoughts can be questioned. They feel optional. But when the inner demon is active, thought changes its role. It stops offering ideas and starts issuing commands. The mind no longer says, "Maybe I should respond." It says, "I must respond. I cannot stay silent. This must be corrected now." Notice how absolute this feels. There is no sense of choice, no room for reflection, no patience for delay. This urgency is crucial to recognize. True clarity is calm. It allows time. It does not rush. Urgency, on the other hand, is a sign that identity has already formed. The thought is no longer just a thought. It has become who you are in that moment. And once thought becomes identity, action feels unavoidable. This is not strength. It is momentum. If the mind can no longer pause, how does this show up in our emotions and physical sensations? Emotions themselves are not dangerous. Anger, fear, desire, and doubt are part of being human. The problem begins when experience becomes compressed. When the inner demon takes over, everything tightens. Emotion intensifies quickly. The body tenses. Breath becomes shallow. Most importantly, space disappears. There is no room around the feeling, no distance between sensation and response. Normally, there is a small gap between feeling and choice. Here, that gap collapses. Feeling becomes action, immediately, automatically. This loss of space is the clearest signal. Freedom does not depend on having no emotions. Freedom depends on having room. When there is no room, habit moves on its own. So the key sign is not emotional intensity, but the disappearance of the pause. And once this is seen clearly, a natural question arises. If the pattern can be recognized so clearly, why is it that fighting it or pushing it away only makes it stronger? Imagine this situation. Someone says something that hurts you. Anger rises immediately. You notice it and think, "I must not be angry. I need to control myself." So you fight the anger. Inside, the body tightens. The jaw clenches. The breath becomes shallow. What happens next? The anger doesn't leave. It becomes sharper. Why? Because fighting already means you are engaged. It creates two sides. I versus this anger. That division is exactly what the pattern needs to survive. It's like trying to push a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the stronger it shoots back up. Fighting anger with force is still anger. You are adding energy to the same frequency. So the problem is not that anger appeared. The problem is that resistance gave it more fuel. Some people don't fight, they suppress. For example, you feel hurt, but you smile and say, "I'm fine." You feel fear, but you tell yourself, "This is silly." On the surface, everything looks calm, but inside, something is held down. Suppression is like closing the lid on a boiling pot. The steam doesn't disappear, it builds pressure. Later, it comes out as sudden irritation over small things, exhaustion with no clear reason, emotional numbness, or an unexpected emotional explosion. This is why suppression often feels controlled at first but becomes unstable over time. Nothing was actually resolved, it was only postponed. So fighting pushes the energy. Suppression traps the energy. Neither one creates freedom, which leads us to the most subtle trap of all. Fear often hides underneath both fighting and suppression. Fear of losing control, fear of being overwhelmed, fear of going backwards. For example, you notice a strong urge or emotion and think, "Oh no, this shouldn't be happening. What if I can't handle this?" That fear immediately tightens the system. Attention locks onto the emotion. The body braces. The mind watches anxiously, and whatever is watched with fear gains importance. It's like staring at a shadow in the dark, heart racing, making the shadow seem bigger than it is. Fear does not remove darkness. It magnifies it. This is why force never works. Darkness is not undone by pressure, control, or fear. It dissolves only when it is met with clarity. So the real question now is, if fighting, suppressing, and fearing the pattern all make it stronger, how can we meet it without feeding it, and without being pulled along? When strong emotions arise, the mind feels fast and out of control. At that moment, trying to stop thoughts usually doesn't work. So we start somewhere easier. We start with the body. Simply do not move yet. Do not reply. Do not argue. Do not explain. Do not make a decision. Just pause the body for a moment. Take 2 or 3 slow breaths. This may seem too simple, but it is extremely effective, because emotions need movement to turn into action. When the body pauses, the chain is interrupted. You are not pushing the emotion away. You are not pretending it isn't there. You are simply saying, "Nothing needs to happen right now." And that small pause already creates space. Once the body is still, the next step is very simple. Name what is happening, not in a spiritual way, not in a dramatic way, just honestly. This is anger. This is fear. This is anxiety. This is craving. That's all. Why does this help? Because when you name something, you stop being lost inside it. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you see, anger is here. This small change matters. It reminds you that this is a state, not your identity. You don't need to analyze it. You don't need to judge it. Just recognize it clearly. The moment something is clearly seen, it already has less power. Now comes the part that sounds simple, but feels new to many people. Do nothing with the emotion. Do not follow it into action, but also do not try to make it disappear. For example, anger is present. You don't speak from it, but you also don't say, "I shouldn't feel this." You let it be there. Think of it like weather. A storm passes through the sky. The sky does not chase it. The sky does not fight it. The sky simply allows it to pass. When you don't feed the emotion with action, and you don't add resistance, it naturally begins to calm down. Not because you forced it, but because nothing is holding it up anymore. Finally, gently notice something very important. The emotion is being noticed. So ask quietly, what is noticing this? You don't need an answer in words. Just feel the sense of being aware. Anger is here, and it is noticed. Fear is here, and it is noticed. But the noticing itself is not angry. It is not afraid. It is steady. When you rest in this awareness, the emotion no longer feels like you. It feels like something moving through you. This is the key shift. The emotion may still be there, but it no longer controls you. It has no seat to sit on. And that is what freedom feels like. Not dramatic, just clear and calm. If this way of meeting emotions is so simple, why does it seem easier for some people than for others? Before we continue, there is something important to acknowledge. This practice we've just explored may feel simple when you hear it. And yet, you may notice something honest. For some people, standing still comes more easily. For others, the same moment feels overwhelming. This difference is not about effort, it is not about intelligence, and it is not about how long you have practiced. It has to do with the inner conditions that have been forming long before the moment arises. The mind does not respond only to what is happening now. It responds with everything it has been carrying. So to understand why this practice feels lighter for some and heavier for others, we need to look at what supports inner stability over time. This brings us to something often misunderstood, yet deeply practical. Merit, inner strength, and the conditions that quietly shape how steady we can be when emotions arise. When we hear the word merit, it is easy to misunderstand it as a reward system, as if good behavior earns points and difficult emotions mean we are lacking something. But merit in this teaching means something much simpler. Merit is inner resilience. It is the accumulated momentum of living in ways that do not constantly disturb the mind. When you act in alignment with your values, the mind does not need to defend itself. When you speak honestly, there is less inner tension. When you act with care, there is less regret to process later. Over time, these small choices create stability. So, when a strong pattern arises, it does not take over so easily. Not because you suppress it, but because the mind already has balance. Merit is not about being rewarded. It is about being less easily shaken. This inner balance does not come from chance. It begins with accumulated merit, and it continues through the way we live each day. Ethical living is often misunderstood as following rules. But here, it simply means living in a way that creates fewer openings for disturbance. For example, when you lie, part of the mind stays alert, guarding the story. When you act harshly, anger stays close, ready to return. When you harm others or yourself, guilt quietly remains in the background. These states weaken inner stability. Ethical living reduces these entry points. It means choosing actions that you do not need to justify later. It means speaking in ways that allows the body to relax afterward. This is not about being perfect. It is about not constantly reopening old wounds. When there are fewer inner conflicts, habitual patterns have less leverage. So ethical living is not moral pressure, it is mental protection. Beyond ethical choices, certain inner qualities further soften the mind and make strong patterns less gripping. Certain inner qualities naturally soften strong patterns. Kindness is one of them. When kindness is present, the nervous system relaxes. The body feels safer, and reactions slow down. Clarity is another. Seeing things as they are, without exaggeration or storytelling, prevents emotions from escalating. And then there is restraint. Restraint does not mean repression. It means knowing when enough is enough. Not every thought needs to be followed. Not every impulse needs expression. Together, these qualities change the inner environment. Negative patterns still arise, but they feel less intense. They move through more quickly. Like dye dropped into clear water, they spread less when the water is already calm. This is how inner strength grows quietly, without force. Even when these qualities are present, it is important to understand what they do and what they do not do. Even with strong inner conditions, the inner demon may still appear. This does not mean something has failed. It means conditioning is still unfolding. The difference is not whether patterns arise, but how much power they have. In a weak system, a small trigger creates a strong reaction. In a stable system, the same trigger creates movement, but not takeover. Strong conditions reduce the reach of patterns. They shorten their lifespan. They prevent identification. So when something difficult appears, it no longer defines you. It is simply something happening. And this is important to remember. Progress is not measured by the absence of challenges, but by the presence of space, which leads to a final, gentle question. So when difficult patterns still appear, the meaning has quietly changed. It is no longer a sign of failure, but a sign of clearer seeing. The question is no longer, why is this happening to me? But simply, what is now becoming visible that wasn't before? Before we end, there is one last shift worth making. Up to now, we may still be listening with a quiet hope that one day this inner demon will disappear. That one day nothing difficult will arise again. But what if that expectation itself is another form of struggle? What if the real invitation of this teaching is not to get rid of anything, but to see something more honestly? So instead of asking, how do I eliminate this? Let us ask something softer. What is this experience really showing me? When the inner demon appears, it is not announcing failure. It is revealing a place where identity still clings. A place where the mind quietly says, this is me. This matters too much. This cannot be touched. That is why it feels intense. Not because the emotion is dangerous, but because something personal is being protected. In this way, the inner demon functions like a mirror. It shows blind spots we could not see before. It highlights edges of the self-image that awareness has not fully reached. Without this mirror, those places would remain hidden, and what remains hidden cannot be freed. Insight does not deepen when everything is calm and pleasant. It deepens when something uncomfortable is met with clarity. Each time the inner demon arises and is seen, not followed, not resisted, not judged, a layer of identification loosens. Something that once felt solid is revealed to be a movement, a pattern, a habit, not a self. This is why awakening is not dramatic. It is quiet, incremental, honest. Freedom does not come from winning a war inside the mind. There is no victory parade. Freedom comes from seeing, again and again, until there is nothing left to mistake for me. So perhaps the most helpful ending is not an answer to hold on to, but a space to rest in. When everything that arises is fully seen, fully allowed, and no longer taken personally, there is no need to push anything away. There is no need to fix what appears. Thoughts come, emotions move, sensations rise and fall. And through all of it, something remains quietly aware. Nothing is excluded. Nothing is claimed. In this openness, the question of the inner demon no longer needs a response, not because it has been defeated, but because it no longer has a place to stand. Rest here for a moment. Nothing to solve, nothing to become, just this clear, gentle awareness, exactly as it is.